Another week, another set of rankings for the ESPN Wisconsin Media Poll Rankings Reveal Show. Good afternoon, everybody, on Tuesday afternoon, September 24th, 2024. My name is Jesse Nelson in the Everlight Solar Studio here at ESPN Madison. It is my pleasure to bring you these rankings each and every week, along with our star-studded panel. First, there is the Dean of Area High School Sports in the greater Madison area. He is our longtime friend and partner, Dennis Semrau. Dennis, good afternoon. How we doing?
Hey, we're past the halfway point of the regular season. I would have thought. We're
Can't
talking
believe
basketball.
This is always where it gets tricky for me because you get past the midway point of the regular season for football, and school's been in session for like 3 weeks, and that just it doesn't make the math make sense to me in any way. But because they start early, that's how it works.
Unless you go to a private school, they've been in school for a month
exactly.
and a half,
a couple of them have been right, but it always just is so crazy to me how the regular season for high school football flies by. Speaking of which, our other panelist rejoining us after a couple of weeks away. He is from La Crosse. He is Todd Sommerfeld. Todd, good afternoon. Good to see you again, my friend. How you doing?
Doing all right. Thanks for having me back. Appreciate it. You're talking about midway of the season. Now we're starting to talk playoffs and teams getting in and looking ahead on their schedules to see how many more they have to win, that kind of thing. So a new phase of the season coming upon us now.
A new phase, and definitely seeing some separation in our rankings, a little more consistency over the last couple of weeks since you last joined the show, Todd. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Again, we have two divisions that we rank every week. The small schools, enrollment size 549 and lower, roughly the teams that will be playing in the state championship games on Thursday in divisions 4 through 7 at Camp Randall Stadium. And then the enrollment size 550 and up, that is the large division, roughly divisions 3, 2, and 1, the teams that play state championships on Friday this November at Camp Randall Stadium. As we always do, we begin with the small school rankings this week. And if you thought last week there wasn't much change with the small schools, just you wait for this week. If you're looking for drama, you're going to have to find another channel for right now for where the drama takes place, because it is not with the small school rankings this week. Checking in at number 10, and this is your big movement. Stanley Boyd, the Orioles, down one spot technically, even though they were winners in a non-conference game out of state. I forget how the WIA handles all this, Dennis, and Todd, you'll have to fill me in on it. But 51-8, they defeated Spectrum in Minnesota. That was a game after a canceled game with Osseo Fairchild. So they did this reschedule with Spectrum, Minnesota. Stanley Boyd, they crushed Spectrum, Minnesota, but they moved down from being tied for 9th in last week's poll. Dennis, what do you think of how Stanley Boyd was treated here by the voters?
Well, they've they've only allowed 6 points in the first half all season. Been pretty dominant, and I'll tell you, it maybe just says something about Lodi. That Lodi has had a couple good back-to-back wins after that loss to Columbus, and maybe that is the separation in that conference. But it's a non-conference game, so people don't know much about that Spectrum team.
Yeah, Lodi was tied for 9th with Stanley Boyd last week. Todd, what do you make of how the voters have treated Stanley Boyd here playing an out-of-state game in the middle of the season?
Well, going along with what Dennis said, the reason they're here is, playing really good defense for one thing. They give them 50 points all year, 30 of them been in the fourth quarter, so they're building leads. They had to go out and find a game to play and found a team in Minnesota. Again, people here are not very familiar. Even I'm by Minnesota, and I don't know much about Spectrum. So it's not on this side of the state, that's for sure. So, but yeah, a good beat. The one thing to watch for them is they play Regis in a couple of weeks. They have that win over Mondovi, which I'm sure people are still looking at in terms of, giving them votes in this thing.
What I know about Spectrum is I'm getting the NFL Red Zone again for the next few months. That's the extent that I know. But wait, I've been saving that one up. Thank you. Hunter's shaking his head, the producer of the show. Checking in at number 9. All right, comedy hour's over. At number 9 here in the small school rankings. If Stanley Boyd is 10, then as expected, Lodi does check in at number 9. 35-0 shutout win over Clinton. Dennis Semrau, they were tied last week for 9th, and now it sets up a big showdown this week with Lake Mills and Lodi in the Capital Conference.
Yeah, ever since that Columbus loss, last 2 games, 70-7, including last week's shutout. Lake Mills, that's a team I've kind of been keeping an eye on all year because, they haven't had a chance to play Columbus and Lodi yet, and they got them now coming up here. So I think the Outcats, it's always a tough game for Lodi. But the thing about Lodi is they pretty much grind it out. They're averaging just about 100 yards passing, little over 100 yards rushing. So not a lot of offense. They're getting it done with their defense primarily.
Lodi checks in at number 9 in this week's rankings. Again, they were tied for 9th with Stanley Boyd last week. Stanley Boyd officially in at 10, Lodi at number 9. We are now going to comb through in spots 8 through 1 because everybody won in the small school rankings in the top 10 from last week. So here we go. Checking in at number 8. The Kiel Raiders, 42-14 winners at St. Mary Catholic. This week they get Valders. Kiel and Valders meeting this week. Edgar is in at number 7, 35-0 winners over Pittsville. They get Assumption on the road this week. Edgar continuing to stay strong at number 7 in the small school rankings. In at number 6. Same spot as last week for the Regis Ramblers, shutout winners. Again, that defense on full display, 26-0 over Fall Creek. They're on the road for a fun contest at Mondovi this week. Mondovi is a team that had been ranked in the top 10 up until last week. So, Todd, I think when we talk about small school games to keep an eye on this week, Regis and Mondovi seems to be near the top of the list.
Well, yeah, this week and next week for Regis. As I said before, they got to play Stanley Boyd then, too. So, big game, as you said, against Mondovi, but a important 2-week stretch, I guess, here for Regis to kind of really figure out where they are in the big picture.
We'll talk more about them in a moment here to see if they can propel up in front of some of the teams in front of them here on the left side of the screen as you watch with us on the ESPN Wisconsin YouTube channels on the ESPN Wisconsin Media Poll Rankings Reveal Show. In at number 5. It's the Aquinas Blue Golds once again. This was a tough contest. Todd, this was up in your neck of the woods, 14-7. Aquinas got it done against Luther, but we said last week this would be one of the best games on the docket across the state in Week 5, and it did not disappoint.
Yeah, that's Luther's played pretty well a couple of times against Aquinas in recent years. Aquinas ended up winning kind of one-sided games, but Luther would hang with them for the first 3 quarters. Or at least they've done that before. This one, obviously, they hung with him right until the end. Logan Becker with a big touchdown. He's got 4 of them this year, 322 receiving yards. So I think it was the kind of test that Aquinas wanted. They knew they were going to get a good game out of Luther. I think people in Luther have been eyeballing this year for a few years as this could be a big one for them. Now they have to turn around and play West Salem, so we'll see where that goes for them. But I'm still going to call it a big win for Aquinas. I think Luther's going to end up winning a lot of games this year, and Aquinas is bouncing back pretty good since the loss to Columbus.
Yeah, that's the first loss for Luther this year, and they do have another tough contest this week. We'll talk more about that matchup with West Salem coming up in a little bit. Meanwhile, back to the rankings. So Aquinas is in at number 5 once again this week. That's no change from a week ago. The number 4 team in the small school division in the state heading into Week 6. The St. Mary Springs Ledgers, 45-8 winners over North Fond du Lac, and they get Campbellsport on the road this week. Dennis, you said circle this game. This could be a fun one to keep an eye on for head coach Bob Hyland and the St. Mary Springs Ledgers.
Yeah, Campbellsport's got 1 loss, but they got back-to-back games coming up with Lamira and Mayville, both unbeaten in the conference. So you don't want to stumble. You don't be looking ahead at those teams. They got to take care of what's in front of them. But they've outscored opponents 211-43, so their offense has been incredible. Even more so, we talk about fast starts. They've only given up 6 points in the first half all season. And no turnovers, according to the stats I see, in 5 games. I'm not sure if that's a typo or not, but I looked up with sports and said 0 for both fumbles and interceptions. So if that's the case, it doesn't get much better than that.
St. Mary Springs keeps it rolling as they do each and every year, a traditional power in the state of Wisconsin. Small school rankings, teams 3 through 1. We had no change for number 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. I wouldn't imagine any for 3, 2, and 1 as well. Checking in at number 3, the Wrightstown Tigers. Sure enough, they were 3 last week. They get a 34-21 win over Two Rivers, and this week they go on the road to face Little Chute. Does Wrightstown, another team that's been strong all season long. Number 2 in the small school division. Once again, it's the Columbus Cardinals receiving votes for number 1, but they are in at number 2. 57-13, a dominating win over Bigfoot. Number 2 I think that's now the 3rd consecutive week for Columbus after such a strong start to the season, Dennis, with those wins, including the big one over Aquinas in week 2. The Columbus Cardinals, kind of a surprise story that we've talked about every week on this ranking reveal show, and they keep getting it done, not taking their foot off the gas.
Yeah, their offense has been pretty potent, but they're only giving up about 45 yards rushing a game. So the ground Cardinals, and they've always been a good run first type of a team, but the run defense, so I think, has been really good. But they got a game Lake Mills in week 7. That'll be their next test.
Can't wait to see Columbus and Lake Mills in week 7. Back-to-back weeks for Lake Mills. They get Lodi and then Columbus, chance to maybe work their way into the top 10. Meanwhile, back to the rankings. If Columbus is number 2, then you know who's number 1 this week. Again, in the small school rankings, it is the Stratford Tigers. 53-33 winners against Waiawega Fremont. High-scoring affair for Stratford. They get it done, and now they face Colby coming up this week. Stratford in at number 1. So Todd Sommerfeld of the Lacrosse Tribune, you see the top 10 here again this week. Virtually no change from last week. The only difference, Stanley Boyd officially 10, Lodi officially 9. What stands out to you in this week's rankings?
Well, I think this is a week that, we just did, like you said, not a lot of change. We didn't have a lot of big matchups this week. That's going to change the next couple of weeks, as we've already talked about here. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that goes. Just one more note about Stratford. They're giving up 27 points in the first 4 games. Giving up 33 to Waiawega, you get a big lead, and sometimes that happens. But, really good defense again out of Stratford, which is kind of what we've been seeing from them recently. And again, back to Regis with the 2 big games coming up, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what Lake Mills does with the 2 games that it has the next couple of weeks, because they're just on the outside of the top 10.
Dennis, what stood out to you from all these rankings here in the small schools?
Yeah, against Stratford, you got to be able to run the rock in November, and they can do it. They're averaging 7 yards a carry. Think about that. 244 yards rushing. So you playing some pretty good defense. Yeah, they gave up 33 points more than they had in the first 4 games. But, again, you look at sometimes, we saw that with Monhor Barneveld early in the season, they bring in their 2s and 3s to give up 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. So sometimes scores don't mean as much. But now I like the fact that we are getting 2 games that really mean a lot, and conference titles are on the line here the next 2-3 weeks.
Yeah, going to be exciting to see how this all plays out in the small schools. Expecting a little bit of movement next week, one way or another. Hunter Vaughn, our producer for our ESPN Wisconsin Media Poll Rankings Reveal show. What stood out to you, cumulating the data from the voters, of which, again, I am not one. Dennis and Todd are. So any hate that you have for any of this can direct their way, not mine. But Dennis, what stood out to you from the... Dennis, you're right here. Hunter, what stood out to you in the rankings this week?
It's the same as last week, really. Like, nothing, obviously it showed that, but even like the voting proportions for everything, nothing really changed. It was only a 3-point difference between Kiel and Lodi in that 8-9 spot, which was, again, very similar to what we saw last week, where that bottom of the polling is very tight in this small school. A team to keep an eye on, though, is Lake Mills. They're sitting right now at 14 points. Stanley Boyd at 27 for number 10. So there's still some distance there, but Lake Mills has that big game coming up against Columbus. If Lake Mills goes out there and shocks the world, all of a sudden that's going to be a team that's going to jump in. Otherwise, I have a feeling we're going to be seeing pretty much the same group of 10 teams here for the next few weeks.
Seems like some consistency there in the small school rankings, no doubt. Big week for Lake Mills, Lodi this week, and then Columbus to follow. Definitely the one team that it looks like could cause a little stir in the small school rankings in the coming weeks. That is your check of the small school rankings following results in week 5, the ESPN Wisconsin High School Football Media Poll. Jesse Nelson, Dennis Semrau, Todd Sommerfeld with you, along with producer Hunter Vaughn. Now time to unveil the large school rankings in this week's ESPN Wisconsin Media Poll Rankings Reveal Show. And let's get right to it. The large schools, again, these teams enrollment size 550 and up, likely playing in the Division 3, 2, and 1 championship games at Camp Randall Stadium in November. Checking in number 10, And welcome to the rankings. The West Salem Panthers, 52-22 winners over Arcadia. First time ranked this year, West Salem. Todd Sommerfeld, what can you tell us about West Salem? Because this is a team that early in the season, I know there were a number of voters looking for where they were, whether they were going to qualify for the large school or the small school in our poll, because they deserved to get some recognition. And now here they are midway through the season in at number 10.
Yeah, the way we've broken it down, it's they could have gone either way for this. They've been getting votes. It's not like they're brand new to this, but they did finally reach the top 10. They've been close in recent weeks. It's an interesting team in that they changed quarterbacks this year. The guy they had quarterback last year, Luke Baginski, really good dual threat guy. They moved him to running back this year, and he's responded with almost 700 yards and 10 touchdowns on 65 carries. The guy they bumped in at quarterback is just a sophomore, Drew McConkey. Has had a really good year, 700 passing yards, 6 touchdowns. He also can run the ball. They're playing great defense. We're looking forward to in a few weeks when we get our West Salem Aquinas game, because that's going to be a real big one on the side of the state. But West Salem has just been dominant. They opened with a win over on Alaska. It was a close game. They pulled away, and they haven't been challenged since.
And you did say West Salem and Luther coming up this week. Going to be a fun contest. Luther battle-tested and gave a good run against Aquinas last week. So we'll see how West Salem fares in that game. Welcome to the rankings, the West Salem Panthers. Moving on in the large school media poll ranking reveal. Number 9 heading into week 6. Up one spot from last week, it is the Cedarburg Bulldogs, 56-21 winners against Whitefish Bay. So Cedarburg wins again. They get West Bend East coming up this week, Dennis.
Yeah, after that, they got Homestead and Slinger back-to-back. Actually, within, I think it's weeks 7 and 9, they got Homestead and Slinger both unbeaten in the conference. First time they're 5-0 since 2008. So kind of a reawakening there of the Bulldogs. They scored 35 points or more for the fourth week in a row. So pretty potent offense. They're in the North Shore Conference, and like I said, their conference title's still up in the air.
Nice run for Cedarburg. Best start since 2008. That's nothing to be ashamed of by any means. It's a great start for that program, and we'll see how far they can take that run come postseason time. Definitely a backloaded schedule, like you mentioned, with Homestead and Slinger to close things out in the last couple of weeks. Number 8 in this week's poll, the Rice Lake Warriors, up one spot from number 9 a week ago, 47-30 winners over Chippewa Falls. They get New Richmond this week. Todd, what can you tell us about the Rice Lake Warriors, a team that made it all the way to that Division III championship game last year and won it?
Well, lots of offense. They've scored at least 44 points 3 times. This game against New Richmond could be interesting. New Richmond's still undefeated. Just scored 40 in a game against River Falls, which is usually a pretty good program. Maybe not on top this year, but still going to be a good program. You got two backs there, not a quarterback and a running back combined. They're over 1,000 yards and 13 touchdowns. So they're keeping up that history they have of being able to run the ball and kind of just run over people. That's kind of what they've been doing. I think beating Chippewa Falls by 17 is still pretty impressive. They gave up 30, but another big offensive game with 47. So that offense is just really chugging right now for Rice Lake.
Rice Lake, they do it every year, and here they are once again, number 8 in this week's poll, and with a chance to move up again, facing an unbeaten opponent in New Richmond this week. One of the games to keep an eye on for the large school top 10. In at number 7 this week, a team up one spot again from a week ago, the Marquette Hilltoppers, 45-7 winners in a strong road contest at Menominee Falls. They get West Alice Hale coming up this week. Marquette, the team that started the season, the reigning Division I champions, at number 1 heading into week 1. They lost in week 1, dropped all the way down to 10, and now here they are working their way back up to number 7 as they progress later into the year, Dennis.
Yeah, they're going to get their tests in week 8 and 9. They get Sussex Hamilton and then Coquantico. How about that to play before you go into the playoffs?
No kidding.
But Marquette, Tommy Novotny, I've been watching him. 4 more touchdowns rushing. So they've got it going on the ground, and ever since that first game, we said they could possibly win out going into the playoffs, and right now they're trying to.
The number 6 team in the large school media poll rankings this week is The Mukwonago Indians, 49-20 winners over the Pewaukee Pirates. They are up one spot from number 7 last week. I'm trying to avoid the elephant in the room here as Mukwonago gets set to visit Kettle Moraine this week. I guess now would be the time to address it. My alma mater is the Muskego Warriors, and they were number 1 in this poll for several weeks in a row. And they have lost 2 straight games now. First, it was to Mukwonago at home on homecoming at Muskego, which is just a brutal loss in a rivalry game. And then they followed up with a 7-3 loss on the road against Arrowhead. So we were talking about would any team in the Classic 8 separate itself, as we thought there might be this little round robin of Arrowhead, Mukwonago, and Muskego maybe all 1-1 against each other. Well, it turns out I think Arrowhead is now taking the lead in that category here with getting wins over both of those teams. And so checking in at number 5 this week seemed as good a time as any to unveil the Arrowhead Warhawks. Number 5 after the 7-3 win over Muskego. I got to admit, guys, I'm surprised by that. After back-to-back great wins, Arrowhead's having a fantastic season. They did have the one loss early, but with wins over a team that had been ranked number 1 and then also a win over a strong Mukwonago team, I thought Arrowhead would move up a little bit here in this week's poll. Do you think there's any reason why the voters haven't moved them up, Dennis?
Oh, because the other teams in front are all having great seasons as well. But Arrowhead now, the Oconomowoc, this is their last test, you can say.
Yeah.
Both teams are tied for first. For Oconomowoc, they haven't won more than 3 games in the league since joining the conference in 2017. So,
in fairness, it's been loaded.
Yeah, it's been loaded, exactly. And they're 5-0 for the first time since 2016. Arrowhead, on the other hand, I mean, you look what they've done so far, and I think they're going to keep going. If they win this one, maybe they can jump up. But again, if the teams in front of you don't lose, how do you want, unless it's a real close game or somebody gets hurt or something like that, it's awful tough this time of year to slide up anymore.
Todd, what impresses me about Arrowhead is they've won some high-scoring games in the Classic 8, but they also won 7-3 in a grinded-out game against Muskego on Friday night. Why do you think Arrowhead is in at number 5 for the second straight week after beating Muskego?
Well, I mean, who's had bigger games than Arrowhead this year, and they're winning them.
Mm-hmm.
They got 3 great wins. This one goes down to the end. They get the touchdown drive they need in the fourth quarter to pull it out. I think it was early in the fourth quarter when they got it. But, you got a guy with a quarterback, 650 passing yards, 5 touchdowns. He's also run for 6. So you got a good guy leading the charge there. They've just kind of really risen to the challenge when they've had these big games. So, but like Dennis said, it's hard to get, a little higher than 5 on this thing. If you're looking at a team that has a chance, certainly Arrowhead. If one of these top teams slips out, Arrowhead's going to fit in there really nicely and certainly deserve the spot.
And the other thing is the teams in front of them are all unbeaten. They still have that one loss.
They do have the one loss.
But again, you mentioned that the quarterback, again, fourth quarter touchdown. Wow, that game, you got to be thinking, field goal, overtime. How many overtimes it could be? But the quarterback came through. I really like the way they play. And if somebody stumbles and gets a loss, they'll definitely move up.
So Arrowhead is in at number 5. Again, a quick recap. West Salem at 10, Cedarburg 9, Rice Lake 8, Marquette 7, Mukwonago 6, Arrowhead 5. The number 4 ranked team in the state in the large division is the unbeaten Verona Wildcats, coming off a huge win, convincingly 44-0 against Madison La Follette. Dennis, you and I will see Verona this week in the big rivalry game against the Middleton Cardinals. Don't sleep on Middleton having a chance in this one. This is a big rivalry between these two teams. I would say in the Madison area, probably the best rivalry game that we've seen over the last decade. But Verona looks like they've got everything cruising right now.
Yeah, let's put it this way. Rob Hernandez, Mr. Verona, I lived in Middleton District. We always had a pizza bet on this game. And a couple of years I had the upper hand. I'm not even calling him this year on this one because I've seen Verona a couple of times and I've seen Middleton. And yes, I think Verona is the better team, but that's the way we play the games on Friday nights. Now, Verona's only given up 12 points in conference play. They have a 17-game Big 8 winning streak. Middleton would love to snap that. In the past, this has been a nasty game. I think 2 years ago, I think we called the game, and I said the over-under on personal fouls would be 5. We had 6 that game. Under the coaches right now, I think with Tim and Joe at Middleton and Andrew Riley at Verona, they've got that under control. But it's going to be a hard-hitting game, and it's at Verona, so that's why I think they get the edge.
You love to see the rivalry and the competitiveness, and it is fun when you get two communities that love going, toe-to-toe in your very competitive teams. You don't like the extra stuff, so, obviously, the stay off social media type stuff that we've heard over the last few years. I mean, it riles you up for the game, but you hate to have that, coming into play in high school sports.
Used to be billboard material.
Exactly.
Forget that. Now it's phones.
So
get them off their phones.
Going to be a fun one. Verona and Middleton. It's at Verona Friday night. Watch it on the ESPN Madison YouTube channel. Listen to it on 100.5 ESPN Madison. At number 3 in the large school media poll this week is, once again, the Notre Dame Tritons. Green Bay Notre Dame with a 42-0 win over Manitowoc Lincoln. They just keep pummeling all their opponents, Todd. This week they go on the road at Menasha, but Notre Dame, I don't see how they don't get unbeaten through this season.
Yeah, I mean, that's 2 straight shutouts for them. They've given up 30 points all year. They have good back in Christian Collins. He had 3 touchdowns in that game against Manitowoc. As you said, Menasha next. Traditionally, a pretty good team. So we'll see if they can give them a challenge. But, yeah, Notre Dame is going to be a tough team to knock off until we're deep into the playoffs.
It's actually going back to week 3. It's 11 straight quarters of shutout football.
Wow.
And you think this might be the only team that might have a shot to maybe knock them off before the end of the year. But the guy that I keep tracking all year is James Flanagan. Dad to Notre Dame. He's a legacy. He's going to be going there. 7 sacks, a fumble recovery, and he was 10 catches, 194 yards, 4 touchdowns. That's his stats right now. This guy can do it all. And we talk about coming up, with Trey Poteet with Verona. This is a guy that I'm watching all year long because I got to see them play against Mount Hort-Barneville last year. This kid is a stud on both sides of the ball. And we knew Wisconsin didn't have a chance. His dad went to Notre Dame, so I don't fault him for that. But too bad we couldn't have kept him in state.
Yeah, the Notre Dame Tritons, and soon to be the Notre Dame Fighting Irish for Flanagan. But yes, Notre Dame in at number 3 this week, no change. Number 2, no change either for the second straight week. The Kimberly Papermakers are the number 2 ranked team in the state. 42-14 winners over Appleton East. They get Hortonville this week, which means once again your number 1 ranked team is the Franklin Sabres. We talked last week, Dennis, that they could have a test in store going on the road against Oak Creek in the battle of Highway 76 or Rawson Avenue or wherever you want to say they were fighting for. Franklin wins it 52-21. They get Kenosha Bradford coming up this week, but Franklin is once again the number 1 team in the large school media poll. Todd Sommerfeld, anything stand out to you from this week's rankings? One new team is in there in West Salem. Muskego, notably, has dropped out. What else stands out?
That's the kind of big thing over here is, West Salem finally cracking it because they've been getting votes and have been putting together a really good season over here. Luther's going to be a good test for them just to really kind of see where they are among, playing the good teams. They did beat on Alaska already, as I said. So a good test for them. And not a lot of movement here, so obviously. So West Salem's kind of the big thing that jumps out of me in terms of the large schools.
Some fun games on the docket this week, Dennis.
You look at that one. You look at Rice Lake and New Richmond, a couple unbeaten teams. New Richmond's only given up 9 points a game, and Rice Lake's averaging 41, so something's got to give in that one. We talked about the Verona-Middleton game, which is a great rivalry. Again, the Classic 8. And then you look at Franklin. They just keep going. Joey Calais had 300 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. And their running back, Beglinger, had 4 touchdowns. So they're just a juggernaut right now. And they played for the helmet game. I was trying to find some information on that. Todd, do you know much about that? That's a trophy. They passed it. Last year they said it was at halftime. It was pretty much passed it back to them. So that's something that's gone back and forth the last couple of years. So I'd like to get some more information on that. I couldn't find much on the internet. So
I got a lot of family that lives in that area, so I'll head down there this weekend maybe and get you some insight.
Yeah, now as we're heading toward the end, we've got some great rivalries, like long-time ones around the state coming up here too, which always makes the last 2-3 weeks of the season a lot of fun.
You mentioned the unbeatens going toe-to-toe. New Richmond and 8th-ranked Rice Lake this weekend. Luther's 4-1, just coming off the loss to Aquinas, who's ranked number 5 in the small school poll. They're at 10th-ranked West Salem this week. Middleton and unbeaten Verona, number 4 in the rivalry game this week on ESPN Madison. And then the battle of fifth-ranked Arrowhead, and undefeated Oconomowoc. Oconomowoc gets its first big test in Classic A play to see if they're a true contender for the conference title or not this year. Guys, thanks as always. The ESPN Wisconsin Media Poll Rankings Reveal Show. Appreciate your insights. Todd, thanks for coming on back, and we look forward to catching up again soon.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Todd Sommerfeld of the La Crosse Tribune joining us here on the show, and the Dean of Area High School Sports in Madison, Dennis Semrau. Looking forward to the call of Verona and Middleton with you on Friday night.
Yeah, it's going to be a cool one. Now you can tell the air's getting a little more crisp now. This is definitely football weather. Let's have some fun.
Appreciate it. Appreciate producer Hunter Vaughn behind the glass, accumulating the results for these polls from all of our voters from across the state each and every week. We always enjoy bringing the rankings to you on these Tuesday afternoons on the ESPN Wisconsin YouTube channels. This has been the ESPN Wisconsin Media Poll Rankings Reveal Show.